I wanted to talk about how asymmetrical transfer is a type of interaction. And within subjects design, asymmetrical transfer can be seen as an interaction between the independent variable and the order of conditions. This is an experiment in which each participant tasted orange juice and rated it from 1 to 5, and tasted milk and rated it from 1 to 5. This is an experiment with one independent variable, and the independent variable is type of drink. The two levels are orange juice and milk. These two people were assigned to the A-B order. These two people tasted orange juice at time 1 and tasted milk at time 2. These two people were assigned to the B-A order. They tasted milk at time 1 and tasted milk at time 2. The average of these two ratings was pretty high, but the average of these two ratings was pretty low. There was a pretty large drop-off right here. That's because these two ratings happened at time 2, and when the participants gave these two ratings, they had already tasted orange juice first, so the milk didn't taste good. You can see this steep drop-off right here. If you look at this steep line right here, this steep line is connecting this average of 4.5 with this average of 1. So this line is connecting the mean of orange juice at time 1 with milk at time 2. These two people were assigned to the BA order, tasted milk at time 1. And when they tasted milk at time 1, it tasted pretty good because they hadn't had orange juice first. That's why this average is pretty high. And these two people tasted orange juice at time 2, and they rated orange juice pretty high also because orange juice doesn't taste bad if you add milk first. That's why this average is also pretty high. So when we go from this average to this average, there's a little bit of a drop-off, but not very much, very little. It might not even be a significant drop-off. So this line right here is connecting this mean of 4.5 with this mean of 4. It's a very shallow line. This line is connecting orange juice at time 2 with milk at time 1. And milk at time 1 has a high average because it tastes fine. There was no orange juice before it. So the lines are not parallel because this steep line is connecting orange juice at time 1 with milk at time 2. This line isn't steep at all because it's connecting milk at time 1 with orange juice at time 2. But the main problem with having asymmetrical transfer is that this really low average down here is dragging down the overall average of the milk ratings. If you wanted to compare orange juice with milk, and you would need to calculate the average of all 4 orange juice ratings, add them and divide by 4, and you need to calculate the mean average of all 4 milk ratings by adding them and dividing by 4. The average of the 4 orange juice ratings is 4.5, and the average of the 2 milk ratings is 2.5. You can see this difference right here in this graph. This is 4.5, this is 2.5. So this is the average of all 4 orange juice ratings. This is the average of all 4 milk ratings. This milk average right here is being dragged down by these 2 low ratings that happened at time 1. If these 2 ratings weren't there, then this overall milk average would be higher. So this difference between the mean of orange juice and the mean of milk is actually skewed by asymmetrical transfer because this milk average had an unfair disadvantage because these 2 ratings are dragging it down, and nothing is dragging down the orange juice rating. You don't want to have asymmetrical transfer if you're interested in comparing the average of one condition with the average of another condition. and you're doing a within subjects design. Now, if your hypothesis is that there will be an interaction here, and the purpose of your study is actually to look for this interaction, then it's fine to find this interaction. But if the purpose of your study was just to compare the two conditions, then you wouldn't want to have asymmetrical transfer because the difference between the two conditions is skewed. Here's another example of asymmetrical transfer. It's an interaction between the independent variable and the order of conditions. Just like the first experiment, this experiment only has one independent variable, which is the tutoring. We have a tutored condition and an untutored condition, and we're recording exam scores. These two people, who were assigned to the A-B order, took the test with tutoring at time 1 and with no tutoring at time 2. These two people who were assigned to the B order took the test with tutoring at time 1 and with no tutoring at time 2. Here, when we look at the two A-B people, we see that they did well with tutoring at time 1, but they also did well with tutoring at time 2. There was a carryover effect in which the tutoring was still helping them at time 2, because they can't be untutored. That's why these two averages are the same. The two people who were assigned to the B order did more poorly at time 1 with no tutoring because they hadn't had a chance to be tutored yet. That's why these two scores are lower. But once they did get tutored at time 2, then they did better. That's why these two scores are higher. So when we just look at the BA people, the mean of these two scores with no tutoring is low or lower, and the mean of these two scores with tutoring is higher. So we can see this in this graph right here. This flat line is connecting these two means that are both 87.5, and this line is connecting these two means, 72.5 and 87.5. They're not parallel, so there is an interaction between the independent variable and the order of conditions, which is asymmetrical transfer. If the two lines had been parallel, we would have said that there's no evidence of asymmetrical transfer. This is a problem again because if we want to look at the effect of tutoring to see how effective tutoring is, these two scores up here that are no tutoring at time 2 are pretty high because these two people had already been tutored at time 1. So when you calculate the mean of all 4 untutored scores, these two scores bring up the average. That's why the average is 80. It's pretty high. So since these two scores bring up the untutored average, it makes it look like the effect of tutoring is smaller than it really is, because these two means down here are only 7.5 apart. So if these two high scores hadn't been there, this average here would have been lower, and the difference between these two means would have been bigger. So once again, the asymmetrical transfer is skewing the difference between the means of the two conditions by either making the difference bigger or smaller. If you have asymmetrical transfer in your data set, and you have an interaction between the independent variable and the order of conditions, like we have here, it basically means that the counterbalancing didn't work. It means that the counterbalancing didn't do its job of preventing progressive error. from skewing the difference between the means of the conditions. If you have asymmetrical transfer in your data set, and you have an interaction between the independent variable and the order of conditions, then the difference between the means of your conditions will either be exaggerated or shrunken down. In the taste test example, the difference between the mean of the 4 orange juice ratings and the mean of the 4 milk ratings was exaggerated because the 2 milk ratings that happened after orange juice were low, and they brought down the mean of the 4 milk ratings. When the 2 milk ratings that happened at time 2 brought down the mean of the 4 milk ratings, it created a larger difference between the mean of orange juice and the mean of milk. In this example that I have on the screen right now, the difference between the means of the 2 conditions is shrunken down because these 2 exam scores at time 2 benefited from the tutoring that happened at time 1. Since these 2 exam scores benefited from tutoring, they ended up being pretty high exam scores, and these 2 exam scores ended up bringing up the average of the no tutoring condition, and that created a smaller difference between the mean of tutoring and the mean of no tutoring. You don't want the difference between the means of your conditions to be exaggerated or shrunken down, which is why you don't want to have any asymmetrical transfer in your data set. You don't want to have an interaction between the independent variable and the order of conditions. You want the AB line and the BA line to be as parallel as possible. In any experiment, the 2 lines aren't going to be perfectly parallel, but you want them to be as parallel as possible, so that the difference between the means of the conditions won't be noticeably exaggerated or noticeably shrunken down. Before we end this video, I wanted to talk about one other example of asymmetrical transfer, besides what we've talked about already. If one condition is much more tiring than the other condition, then that'll also create asymmetrical transfer. Remember that asymmetrical transfer just means that what's being transferred from condition A to condition B isn't the same as what's being transferred from condition B to condition A. If condition A is much more tiring than condition B, then condition A is going to transfer a lot of fatigue over to condition B, but condition B isn't going to transfer very much fatigue over to condition A. That means that condition B is going to suffer from more fatigue at time 2, and condition A is going to suffer from less fatigue at time 2. That's going to create asymmetrical transfer in your data set, and you'll have an interaction between the independent variable and the order of conditions because the AB line and the BA line won't look the same. You don't want to have that type of asymmetrical transfer in your data set either. You don't want to have any type of asymmetrical transfer. One way to eliminate asymmetrical transfer is to take a break between conditions. Sometimes, if you take a break between conditions, then the effect of the condition that happened at time 1 will wear off before condition 2 starts at time 2. But sometimes that won't work. It would probably work in the taste test experiment because the taste of the orange juice at time 1 would wear off before the participants had milk at time 2, and the milk would taste okay at time 2. In this example, that probably wouldn't work because once a participant has been tutored, they can't be untutored. You would have to take a very long break between conditions for the participants to forget everything that they learned during the tutoring sessions. In this type of example in which taking a break between conditions won't help, it's better to use a between subjects design in which there's no chance of asymmetrical transfer.